This week we went through all the tellings of A Christmas Carol to come up with our favorite, The Muppet Christmas Carol. Released in 1992, this was the first Muppet movie without Jim Henson, who had passed away 2 years prior, and the first with his son Brian Henson directing. It's also the first film where Kermit was voiced by Steve Whitmire. In this movie, the Muppets performed the classic Dickens holiday tale with Kermit the Frog as Bob Cratchit, the put-upon clerk of stingy Ebenezer Scrooge played by Caine. Other Muppets, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Fozzie, and Sam the Eagle, weave in and out of the story while Scrooge receives visits from the spirits of 3 Christmases, past, present, and future. They show him the error of his self-serving ways, but the miserable old man seems to be past any hope of redemption and happiness. Sounds like just the thing to get you in the holiday spirit, right? So grab some eggnog, come sit by the fire, as we go deep in the plus. So this week we're talking about A Christmas Carol, and we went through all the possibilities of Christmas Carol versions there are on Disney+. There's the Jim Carrey mocap version, which is a little creepy. There's the classic Mickey Christmas Carol, and then there's the Muppet Christmas Carol. So we decided on the Muppet Christmas Carol. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies, and definitely my favorite Christmas Carol telling. So was this a favorite movie of yours?
So, growing up, no, it wasn't a favorite of mine. I don't actually, I know, right? I have to confess that my family was a big Disney family, but we weren't really a big Muppets family. So there wasn't a lot of focus on anything Muppets when I was a kid. But I certainly watched this movie. It came out in 1992. I was in the middle of high school, I guess. So it wasn't like, I'm 16 and gonna rush out and watch a Muppet movie. But I definitely saw it quite a few times over the years. But when I sat down to watch it to do this show, I hadn't seen it. I haven't seen it in probably over a decade. And it's interesting because going back and watching it, I was surprised at how touching I feel like this movie is. You're so used to the Muppets being kind of a little bit hokey, over the top. It's a little more slapstick and not a really sophisticated kind of comedy. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just you're used to, kind of more physical comedy and that sort of thing. And I've seen plenty of versions of A Christmas Carol. There are certainly any number of Christmas Carol options out there. I definitely have a lot of fondness for the Mickey Mouse version. But watching this, I was surprised at how unique of a version of the story I felt like it was. They do a lot of adhering to the original Dickens text. Gonzo serves as narrator, and he basically fills the role of Charles Dickens, and most of his lines are actually direct quotes from the Dickens novel. So while this wasn't a favorite of mine from, my childhood, I feel like it's going to be a favorite of mine now as a Christmas movie because I was just so surprised and delighted at how much I enjoyed it and how unique of a version of this particular story I feel like it is.
To me, I get a lot of feels from this, from the music, from the lines from the movie. I just remember this movie very fondly, and when I watch it again, it just brings that back. And there's a lot of movie lines that I quote from this movie, including my favorite one, which I've already told you, which is "Light the lamp, not the rat."
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
My apologies!
I feel like I quote it all the time, and nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. Some of the music, though, I'm listening to it, I'm thinking I have this like playing in my head from time to time, just because I became so attached to this music. So overall, like, this is definitely one of my favorite tellings of a story that is a Christmas story, but it doesn't feel like a Christmas story. It feels like a story about redemption and regrets and second chances. It doesn't necessarily seem like a Christmas story in the traditional sense, and yet we see it all the time used as a Christmas story over and over again. It just seems like the easy grab. I mean, TV shows do it, movies do it. I could probably think of about a half a dozen movies off the top of my head, including a Barbie Christmas Carol. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yep. So it's neat to me that this one still is one that I enjoy watching and I enjoyed going back to. So one of the other interesting things about this one is that it was the first movie after Jim Henson died. So it's a Brian Henson production. Steve Whitmire is in as Kermit for the first time. And one of the things that I was reading about after the fact that, again, as a kid, I never would have paid attention to is some of Jim's characters, like Rolf, did not have speaking roles in this movie because I think they still hadn't determined who was going to take over those roles.
Yeah, there was quite a bit that was a first about this movie and different about this movie from Muppets of the Past. It was, like you said, the first after Jim Henson died. It was the first movie that Brian Henson directed. It was the first time Steve Whitmore did the voice of Kermit. Interestingly, he was very distressed about doing it and very anxious. And apparently he had a dream where Jim Henson basically came to him and reassured him that he could take over the voice of Kermit.
Paul Williams did the music for this, and Paul Williams is one of those people that I know, but I don't think anybody under the age of probably 30 knows, maybe, but he was a big deal for a while, and the fact that he did the music for the Muppet movie, the original, and then comes back and does the music for this, I thought was pretty cool. But it's probably part of the reason that I'm so endeared to the music of this one is because of his, I guess, his style. But it just feels like Christmas music to me. I mean, I love hearing these songs, and I have in the past put on the Muppets Christmas Carol soundtrack and listened to that as part of Christmas.
It's interesting that you mentioned earlier the idea of that this movie feels like it's not really a Christmas movie. It feels like it's a movie about redemption. I found a really interesting article where they talked to Paul Williams about the music for this movie. So Paul Williams had done a lot of music for the Muppet movie. He co-wrote Rainbow Connection. And then after that, in the 80s, he actually kind of fell pretty hard into a life of addiction and had really gotten out of scoring music for films and kind of went down this dark path and had finally gotten into recovery. And shortly after that, they contacted him to do the music for this movie. And it was such like this sort of aha moment for him of, coming full circle in his life and going back to being able to do what he loved. And so for him, this movie was a redemption. So, and he felt very strongly that connection with Scrooge's character. I think there's a lot to that too, where his life experience really helped him put just the right kind of feeling and emotion into the music that he wrote for this movie. But going back to, earlier when I had said I didn't really remember this movie particularly from my childhood, I do still remember the music. And it surprised me how some of the music would start playing and I would think, oh my gosh, I totally remember this song. I don't remember the movie that well, but I remember the music from it very well.
Yeah, One More Sleep Till Christmas. I would not have been able to tell you that was a song from the Muppet Christmas Carol, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, I like that song. I remember that song. Marley and Marley is the one that I come back to all the time. Just because I guess maybe it repeats a lot and therefore I have it like burned into my brain, but I kind of love that one. And then It Feels Like Christmas. All of those are great Christmas songs, and I really enjoy them. But the other thing about Paul Williams and his music is he did Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. Freaking love Emmett Otter. Like I was thinking, hey, maybe that's on Disney Plus. It's not because it was pre the Disney relationship. Yep. But I didn't realize how far back that one went. I thought that was like an 80s thing. I think it was a 70s thing. But the fact that he did that music, and I guess it has kind of that little appeal. And some of the Emmett Otter Jug Band characters make an appearance in this movie, as well as Sprocket from Fraggle Rock. I saw Sprocket and I was like, that can't really be Sprocket, right? And then I went and looked it up, and it's like, yep, it is Sprocket, and he's like in a window in the crowd scene, and then you see him again at the end. But I was a huge fan of Fraggle Rock, so I was like, wait a minute, I see that. So it was almost like a little cameo in the movie, so that was kind of fun. It's also interesting to me that this was the first movie under the Disney umbrella. So it was the fourth Muppet movie, but it was the first one for Walt Disney Pictures. And this one and the Muppet Treasure Island were really the two movies under the Disney umbrella, and then it went away for Muppets in Space, and then came back for the reboot with Jason Segel and the Muppets. But interesting to me that they're both back-to-back stories, like retelling of stories, of Dickens' Christmas Carol and of Treasure Island. So I wonder if that formula was something they had planned to do more of, because it seems like it was just Muppet retellings of stories, which we hadn't seen up until that point.
Well, so interestingly, this, like we said, was the first movie Brian Henson did after Jim Henson passed away. And actually, one of his, I guess his agent had approached him and suggested this idea. And Brian Henson said, "Oh, that's an interesting idea. I want to think about that. I will actually consider that as a direction to go." It gave him something that felt enough, I think, of a departure from what his father had done, that maybe he could be comfortable with it. And so while he was thinking about it, the agent called him back and said, "I've actually already sold this idea to ABC. ABC wants to buy it." So that was kind of the motivation to get started working on this movie. And then as they were in production, Disney, who owned ABC, actually came to them and said, "You know what, we don't want this as a TV movie on ABC anymore. We want to make this a theatrical release film." So Disney was really into this to the point where they were willing to put their name behind it and put it into theaters as opposed to just running it as a TV movie.
The first Muppet movie not to include Sesame Street characters.
I did not know that.
So, yeah, I mean, that's what you get for Deep in the Plus. You get knowledge. You get things you did not know before. It's not all Aristotle up in here. We have some, like, minor facts, too. I just think that it's interesting, and I wonder if that Bond was Jim. Like if Jim was so enamored by those Sesame Street characters that he wanted to put them in his movies or not, and that maybe Brian wanted to kind of like make his own mark. And so, again, Sprocket being in there and some of the other Fraggle Rock characters being in there, I think was a very interesting thing. And again, kind of blending the worlds together of Henson Productions.
I was really surprised at just how many Muppets were in this film. I mean, they created, you have the really extensive cast of the Muppets, but then you have all of these, everything from puppets of grapes. In one scene, the Swedish chef is there and he lifts up two domes over some platters and they're singing grapes under the platters, and you've just got dozens and dozens and dozens of Muppets in some of these scenes where they're all dancing. And this was a pretty impressive production when you think about how much puppeteering work needs to go into making all of that happen.
So let's talk about the spirits for a second. I was talking about those and the tones of it. I think you and I both agree that the spirit of Christmas Past was a little creepy.
So creepy.
I don't remember it being that creepy, but I think you mentioned it to me, and then I watched it and I was like, oh yeah, this is creepy.
I don't like dolls, and this feels like something out of like one of those like early 2000s era Japanese horror films, like The Ring. Like it's got, oh god, it's just creepy, and it's just sort of this face and then all this floaty gauze, and it just,
and at the same time though, the Ghost of Christmas Present is one of my favorite characters. And I think maybe just because he's so happy, or because of just like his whimsy or whatever, but I love that character.
So good.
Yeah, and then the last one, the Ghost of Christmas Future, or Yet to Come, is really an interesting choice because you can't see a face, and I think that's usually the case, is you can't see the face, but it's usually because the hood is down. But I mean, there's literally just not a face, which I thought was an interesting choice.
So interestingly, the initial conception of this movie had Muppets that we know playing the ghosts. Originally, the Ghost of Christmas Past was either going to be Robin or Scooter. Christmas Present was going to be Miss Piggy, and then Christmas Yet to Come was going to be either Gonzo or Animal. And so that was kind of the path they started going down initially, and then they decided to change it up and basically create all new characters for all three of the spirits because they wanted to give it kind of a darker overtone and something a little bit more unique, rather than kind of trying to shoehorn in Muppets to fit those roles. But yeah, no, The Ghost of Christmas Present is absolutely my favorite. I love him. The puppeteer who did him is Don Austin, and he actually has some pretty amazing puppeteering credits behind him. Like he was the lead puppeteer for The Little Shop of Horrors. He did Audrey the Plant in Little Shop of Horrors, so that's a pretty impressive credential there for any puppeteer. And then he also did work on Labyrinth, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and a couple of the Star Wars movies.
The opening credits give credit to the actual Muppets. So
Hmm.
it's, hey, here's Kermit the Frog as Bob Cratchit, and here is Gonzo as Charles Dickens. Rather than telling us the puppeteer names or the voices, they're telling us the names of the characters, which I think is awesome. But I love that it's Rizzo the Rat as himself.
Hmm.
That cracks me up because Rizzo, this is his like big breakout movie. I mean, he's like
Hmm.
the co-narrator with Gonzo, definitely the comic relief. I love, like I said, light the lamp, not the rat. But I also love the line where Gonzo decides to use him to clean the window, and he says,
Thank you for making me a part of this.
that's a line that's like in my vernacular, and I didn't even know why until I saw the movie again. I was like, oh yeah, that's why I say that. Thank you for making me a part of this. I just think that's funny. But I did also think that it was interesting that Bean Bunny was in this because Bean is such a big part of the Muppet Vision 3D. And
Hmm.
you don't really see Bean in many other things, and he's in this. And apparently, he was introduced 3 years before this movie came out. But in looking up some stuff, it said that Brian Henson really kind of saw Bean as kind of like the equivalent of a punching bag, like they're always dumping on him, which I thought
Hmm.
was interesting because I don't think I ever saw him that way. But now, then looking back at all the like the breadcrumbs of this and the Muppet Vision, it does feel like he's been kind of a little bit the punching bag, the poor guy. But I don't think that he was really seen too much after this one.
One of the other interesting things I really enjoyed about this movie, you're going into a Muppet Christmas Carol. Like when you sit down and watch uh, the Mickey Mouse version of Christmas Carol, of course, Mickey is Bob Cratchit, but you've got Scrooge McDuck as Ebenezer Scrooge. So you've got all these Disney characters playing all of the roles. But interestingly, in here you have humans intermingling. So you don't have a human playing, or you have a human playing the title character of Ebenezer Scrooge, which I find a little bit interesting for a Muppet movie. Certainly, roles like this are not what Michael Caine is known for in general, and certainly hadn't been known for prior to 1992. But he said the reason he did this movie is his daughter was 7 years old at the time and had never been able to watch anything he had done because they were all movies that were not fit for a 7-year-old. So when they approached him with this opportunity, he took it because he wanted his daughter to be able to watch him in a film. So I thought that was really adorable. And then there's another interesting crossover with Michael Caine and the Muppets that later he did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and that was actually directed by Frank Oz.
Again, just so deep, going deep. So let me do a little bit of lightning round with you. The things that like little facts that I saw. Like I saw the actor who played Fred, his nephew, and I was like, he looks familiar. And I looked him up, and it was Steve McIntosh who played Tanis in Underworld. And
Hmm.
he also has most recently been in the movie Rocket Man. So I thought that was pretty interesting that it wasn't just somebody who was there and gone. He already had a few credits, and then he popped up in this. Then the movie cost $12 million to make, which by 2019 standards seems like 18 cents. It's just ridiculous. It was a pretty impressive set because you have to have it built specifically for actors and Muppets to perform on. So $12 million seems like it really like they're getting off cheap, and it made 27.5 million at the box office. So by those standards, it seems like it should have been a box office success.
Well, interestingly, I think part of the reason it wasn't a box office success is because it came out at the same time as Home Alone 2. They released this as a Christmas movie in 92 and it came out the same year as Home Alone 2. So I think it kind of got overshadowed um, by, interestingly, another movie that is now available on Disney Plus.
Yep, Disney showed them. They just went ahead and bought it. Good job.
Yep.
Near the end of the film, Scrooge and company passed by a store called Micklewhite's. Did you read about this?
Hmm.
That is Michael Caine's real name, Maurice
Hmm.
Micklewhite. So I thought that was kind of cool. They walked back and forth in front of a store that had some garland in front of it, but I swear it looked like it said Statler and Waldorf.
It did. It
Okay.
did. I couldn't read what it said. It said Statler and Waldorf or Waldorf and Statler. I don't remember which. But afterwards, there were some words, and I couldn't read what the other words were, but it
Right.
definitely said Waldorf and Statler.
Well, there you go.
Speaking of Waldorf and Statler, one of my favorite little things to catch in this movie was that during the scene where they go back to Fozziewig's, not Fezziwig, but Fozziewig in this movie, you see the younger Marley brothers,
Right.
and so you have these puppets that are sort of young versions of Waldorf and Statler, which just that cracked me up. I thought that was really fun.
So would you recommend this movie?
Oh, I would 100% recommend this movie. Like I said, going into this not being a huge Muppets person, I was so impressed at how much I enjoyed this. How touching I felt it was, what a great telling of A Christmas Carol it was. If you're a fan of the Dickens actual text, I strongly recommend it because it's always great to see a version of this where you get to hear a lot of Dickens' original words. And there's something really special about hearing them coming out of Gonzo's mouth. And it's just so enjoyable. It's a great family story. It's a great Christmas story. It's a great kind of I want to be a better person story. There's just so much to it that I really found enjoyable and rewarding, and would definitely recommend.
Yeah, me too. I went back to this movie because I loved it, and I thought it was just because of nostalgia, and I think it stands the test of time. So I think it is a great choice if you're looking for a Christmas movie, if you're looking for a Christmas Carol movie to watch with the family. It does stand the test of time. I mean, I like the movie Scrooged. I don't know that it actually stands the test of time as well. It is still funny, but is also much more adult. So if you're looking for like a family version, this is my all-time favorite version of A Christmas Carol, and you should definitely watch it. And if you have any specific opinions about it before or after you watch it, go ahead and leave us a comment. You can leave it below in the comments, or you can put it on our social media at Deep in the Plus, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so this week for our deep picks, I want to go first because usually you go and you have an incredible amount of information and insight, and it's very smart and telling, and mine is not. And especially this week because I feel like I'm going to get flamed for the choice I made. So I'm going to go ahead and do mine first. And my pick of the week is an episode of Boy Meets World, which is available on Disney Plus, so why not? And it's from season 6. It's episode 11. It's called Santa's Little Helpers. Okay, you can laugh now if you want to. That's fine. There it is. Okay, cool. I knew it was coming. So here's why I like this episode is last year when I was looking for Christmas stuff to watch, I mean, I think we all have Christmas movies we watch every year. And so, I've kind of fallen away from some of the Rankin and Bass stuff that I used to watch all the time. Rudolph, Frosty, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and they're still good, but I've watched them so many times that I feel like I don't necessarily have to watch them every year now. There are movies like Elf and a couple others like that I feel like I need to watch every year, but something we tried last year instead was watching Christmas versions of Christmas episodes of TV shows that we like. So I went back to a bunch of old TV episodes that were Christmas episodes, and it was really kind of cool to watch, and it was something a little bit different. And so I did watch The Boy Meets World, and it was the episode where Eric, who is the older brother, which I think any Eric episode is going to be a better episode of Boy Meets World than the typical Cory and Topanga. Again, I feel you judging me, but go ahead, because I was a big fan of this show. So I think an Eric episode is much better. Will Friedle was a great, his character was great in this show. I loved it, especially his relationship with Mr. Feeney. But in this one, he goes in and he's playing like a mall Santa, and a group of kids from the orphanage come in, and he realizes that he can make them happier by giving them things, and he feels good when he does it. And so then he starts stealing the family's Christmas to give to these kids and racking up all this Christmas, all this credit card debt. And then finally he finds a little boy who doesn't actually want things. He wants a family, and the boy's name is Tommy. And then Tommy is introduced in this episode, but continues to play a part moving through the rest of season 6. And then he comes back in Girl Meets World. Spoiler, but he comes back in Girl Meets World. And so it was, to me, it was an important episode for the series weird to say, I know, for Boy Meets World to say this is an important episode, but I feel like it was an important episode for the series. And I think it's kind of the essence or spirit of Christmas. So it was really neat to be able to go back and watch this again. The fact that they have it on demand on Disney Plus is, I think, really cool. And if you get a chance, you should take a look at it. No Aristotle quoted.
Judge, judge, judge.
So
I'm just kidding.
So then, Jill, what is your pick of the week? It's got to be, I'm sure it's going to be very esoteric, so lay it on me.
My pick of the week is so esoteric this week. So my choice is the Roger Rabbit shorts. I know, super highbrow, right? So I'm picking these because I feel like they're a legit deep pick because most people will not realize they're available on Disney Plus. They are hidden away in the extras section of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So if you're a Roger Rabbit fan, but you haven't gotten around to poking in at the extras they have listed, they actually have all 3 Roger Rabbit shorts available in the extras to the movie. So there were 3 they produced. Roger Rabbit itself came out in 1988, and then Tommy Trouble came out in 1989. It was attached to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It was released as a short with that movie. Then Roller Coaster Rabbit came out in 1990, and it was released with Dick Tracy. And then the final one, Trail Mix-Up, came out in 1993, and it was released with A Far Off Place. These are all just, it's the classic Roger Rabbit. It's the actual cartoon without any of the sort of backstory, real life people going on that the movie has. And it's just fun. Like, it's just such a good old school, late 80s, early 90s, in the style of Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry slapstick cartoon comedy. And you've got all the original voices who come back and do the voices for these shorts. They're just so much fun. If you love Roger Rabbit and you haven't ever seen them, you need to go back and watch them. If you've seen Roger Rabbit 100 times, you should still go back and watch them. These are just such great little animated shorts. And the other thing I love about them as a Disney Parks fan is that they were all actually produced in the movie or the animation studio at Disney's MGM Studios at the time. So that is my deep pick.
You definitely caught me off guard there because I really thought you were going to do something more highbrow and also more Christmas, but I agree with you. I love the Roger Rabbit shorts, and the fact that Disney Plus has so many offerings that are in the extras section, that is something that I feel like they're bringing to the table that the other streaming services aren't. So agree. You got to kind of dig in deep and check out every opportunity that you find, and in the meantime, we'll keep digging them up for you and bringing them here.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.